Hi, I'm the Plant Gals, and today I'm going to be talking about how plants have improved my mental health. By the way, if anything comes in front of the screen or you see anything kind of orange and maybe a little bit fuzzy at any point, that's my little cat Noggo. He's very needy. I'm just cozy. I like sitting in front of my plant cabinets on the floor because that's my favorite place to be. And I love my plants, and that's basically what I'm going to be talking about today, is how plants and collecting plants has improved my mental health. Come here, catty. Basically, I started collecting plants in 2020, towards the end of my last year of high school in grade 12 when I was graduating, and it was scary, just because COVID was huge at the time, and like I pretty much couldn't leave my house. There was very little I could do, and I needed something for my brain to think about. So like a little bit of backstory is that I have OCD, so I'm always thinking of something. I'd like not a minute goes by for me where I'm not thinking about something. So I just found that when I was in COVID, I was finishing high school, all I could do was stress about COVID and high school and university, and I just needed something else for my brain to think about. And my mom thought it'd be a good idea to buy me a plant. It was like a little ficus bonsai tree. That was my first plant, and I was obsessed with it. And much like anything in my life, I tend to go head first into things, and I watched all these YouTube videos on plants, and I started discovering people like at the time like Plant Me Ashley and other plant YouTubers who were big during COVID, and I was just like really inspired by them, and I just loved the passion that they had for plants. And I didn't know it at the time, but my one plant would turn into quite a lot of plants, and then a lot of plants, and a passion that I've had for 4 years now, or close around that. It's also turned into me working with the club at my university, which I'm now one of the presidents of, and it's just expanded so much for me. But the one thing that it has done more than anything is improve my mental health. I understand this is not unique, and I think why it's important that I would talk about it. And you don't need to have a mental health condition to struggle with your mental health. Like, we all have good days, we all have bad days, and I find that my plants are able to kind of level me out a little bit. So like I said, during COVID, it gave me something else to think about. It became a hyperfixation for me. Some might say that's bad, but I just loved it. I was so happy, and I got to invest and discover all these new plants and how to take care of them. At the time, the biggest thing was the pink princess philodendron, and I wanted it more than anything in the world. My mom bought it for me for my birthday, and it was like, I think I cried at the time. She was so cute, my little pink princess. I still have my pink princess plant. It has very low quality variegation, and it was very expensive at the time, but that's just what collecting plants in COVID was like. And it brought me a lot of joy, and every new plant I got brought me joy. Every new leaf that came out on a plant brought me joy, and it was really a different kind of just hobby than I've had before, because I was used to playing sports and pretty much that's it. I did take up guitar and ukulele during the pandemic too, which I liked, but it wasn't super fulfilling for me, and I didn't stick with it. Or I kind of like, I still play a little bit, but not like I was then. But plants, if anything, I've just gotten more and more obsessed with them as time has gone on, and it just never stopped for me, because plants are always doing something, and they do teach you patience. But the more plants you have, the more you're getting new leaves. And something that I became instantly passionate about was bettering the variegation of my plants and trying to figure out what fertilizers, what lighting conditions, what humidities, like what I could do to increase variegation in my plants. And it was like the lottery. Every time that I got a new leaf, I was like, did I get it right this time? Are things looking good? Like, have like months of work paid off? And sometimes they would, and sometimes they won't. And I think maybe that's like a little bit of like that. I grew up like opening like a lot of like blind boxes and Pokemon cards, and I think that like getting a new leaf kind of like expressed that same sort of like feeling for me of like, like, am I gonna get this super rare, or am I gonna get the one that I want? And yeah, like, it was really cool. And then also there's just so many types of plants, and when people look at it like, oh, it's like everything is kind of green and everything is a green leaf, but like the more you get into it, the more you see the differences in plants, how cool some are, how they flower, how they form leaves. Like, I like how anthurium, their leaves start out like this big, like little teeny tiny leaves, and then they grow huge and they just expand over time, and it's like so interesting for me to wake up every single day and look at the leaf and be like, oh, is it bigger? And like just that extra level of something that, and it has nothing to do with anything else in my life. Like I do work at a plant store now, but I love that, and I've worked at plant stores in the past and I've loved that too. But it doesn't have to do with the outside of my life. Like when I'm thinking about my plants, it's only my plants. When I look at my plants, I don't think about school. I don't think about, you know, like, am I going to be able to find a job in like the field that I'm currently studying? Am I going to, like, you know, because I like catastrophize, like, is the world gonna end? Is it like all bad? And I found that it just really soothed something in me during COVID that was very hard to soothe for, I think, literally everybody at the time. And it's continued to be kind of like my little escape for a long time. The other thing is I live in Canada. It's very cold here, and I definitely struggle a little bit with like seasonal depression. It is gross, and it doesn't have to do with the cold. I can deal with the cold, but it gets gloomy and I hate it. I hate it so much. And I found that like having a way to better my environment and helped me a lot. And this was something, so I lived in the same house my whole life. I'd never really changed the environment I was in. I had the same bedroom my whole life, so that never really changed. But when I moved into residence a few months after I started collecting plants, I realized that I could just completely reinvent my space. And I lived in something probably smaller than some of your closets, and I was able to fit this plant cabinet in there, and that made a huge difference. And just the plants, I find, add a little bit of happiness to your space, and it doesn't have to be plants, like it can be anything. So yeah, like just allowing myself to take up space was really different and modify my environment. And I think that plants are neat because they change. You have to move them around, they grow, sometimes you cut them, you have cuttings everywhere. Like your space is kind of always in a state of change when you have plants because of the nature of them. They grow, they die, things happen. And having that changing space was really useful for me for dealing with like seasonal depression, because plants made me happy and they remind me of when it's not cold and gross and gloomy. But also because, yeah, it kind of added that little bit of change to my space that I needed, especially during like COVID when I was just like locked inside all the time. I didn't get to leave the house. And I mean, I went to university during COVID too, so the amount of time I could leave my dorm was limited. I didn't have any in-person classes, really, like maybe one or two. So I like wasn't leaving my room a lot, and they just gave something different to the space, which I really enjoyed. And I have continued to bring that mentality with me out of COVID and into my life, and I just take up space in the rooms that I spend my most time in with things that I like and things that I enjoy. See my catty in the background? So funny. I have geckos and I have squishmallows everywhere, and I have my plants everywhere, and the things that my boyfriend's interested in some places, but he's not quite as filling space as I am. And it's very obvious when you walk into my home, the things that I enjoy, the things that I like seeing all the time, and it's really fun for me. And I think that that's like important, and it was something that moving to residence taught me. And then I just kind of like embraced, oh my god, he's so naughty. But I just kind of embraced when I also moved out of residence into my newest place, and for the 2 years that I was in residence. So I'll also talk a little bit about the bad, and this probably comes more with my OCD, but this is something that a lot of people have talked about in the plant community. I would assume this is the same for any community where you're collecting things, or honestly, when you get to a point in any hobby, you start spending money. And plants is addicting. You just keep buying more. There's plants you don't have. There's plants that look better than the ones that you have. And it is so easy to know that you're gonna spend a lot of money. Like you're gonna get into it. You have to buy supplies. If you want it to be aesthetic, you buy different cute little pots for them. And the plants that I like aren't cheap. Some of them are now, but when I was really into them, they aren't. And there's still a lot of expensive plants that I like that I probably plan on buying at some point. And I was bad at spending money on plants for a while. I mean, I was fresh out of the house. I didn't know what I was supposed to spend my money on. Like I was just free. I was on my own. And a lot of my money I spent on plants, which, looking back, I don't think I was that bad, but I could have definitely been better and a little bit more responsible. I just think that anybody goes through that phase. But what I will say is how I was able to mitigate my plant spending and make sure that it wasn't like insane. So I knew from the start that I like collecting things. I've collected things my whole life, and as soon as I realized I was getting into plants, I'm like, okay, this is gonna be like hard for me and addicting. So I'll explain the rules that I set for myself out of the gate and the rules that I learned. So the first rule that I set for myself out of the gate was that I can only buy plants that I don't have. So if I have a philodendron pink princess, even if it sucks, it is the worst variegation, it's ugly, whatever, if I own it, I cannot buy another one. And that was my rule. And I have actually always stuck to that rule. I genuinely think that I've never bought a plant that I already have. I have replaced plants that I've killed, but I have never bought a plant that I already have. Because, like I said, you can propagate them, you can make more for almost all plants. I mean, there's some that you can't propagate or can't propagate easily. And then sure, you know, you buy another to fill out your pot or whatever you want to do. But for me, that was a hard and fast rule. I think, to the best of my knowledge, I've never broken that rule. Maybe I have, but I don't know. Another rule that I set out for myself initially was like that when I went into a plant store, I would know what I want to buy. And this is where I've seen a lot of people say that like wish lists are dangerous, because if you have a list of all the things you want and you can suddenly buy all the things you want, then you buy all the things you want. But for me, I used to just go in and be like, oh my God, I want everything. I want this, I want that. And it was just like, I would leave with all the things I wanted. But they weren't necessarily things I went in there to get. It's kind of like going to Costco and you're like, I need to pick up some chicken wings, and you leave with like the entire store. And you're like, I was here for one thing. So my goal was to actually decide what I wanted to buy and kind of like when and at what price range. And then once I did that, it made things very, very easy for me, because I would just go in, I would see a plant that's on my wish list, I would see that it's in the price range that I set, and I would buy it. So it kind of helped with that overspending aspect, because definitely like the overspending gives me so much anxiety. So the problem is like if I was spending too much money on plants, then it was kind of adding to the anxiety rather than taking away my anxiety. Because I've always done plants and loved plants for taking away my anxiety, but if I was spending too much money, it was giving me anxiety, and that was the wrong thing. So yeah, I think creating a wish list, creating price ranges for the plants that you're looking for, and my biggest thing, and I can say this for being in the hobby for a long time, is to learn to be patient. When I first got in the hobby, everyone was saying that the Monstera obliqua, and I remember, oh my God, I think her channel's called The Rare Plant Shop. At the time, she'll admit that she was wrong on this now. She said that plants, I think it's Kaylee Evelyn, something like that, rare plants like the obliqua will never become available to like the basic person like me. And I believed her, and for years I was like, I have to buy an obliqua. Plant Me Ashley has a great video, I think I've talked about this before, about how there was a plant Facebook group that when the Monstera obliqua prices started coming down, they banned the sale of obliquas so they could keep the prices high and to limit the sale, which is crazy. And so I was seeing Monstera obliquas sell for like 3,000 Canadian, be listed for a lot of money, especially depending on the size of the plant. They were absolutely massive. And people were consistently spending well over $1,000 for one or two cuttings of this plant. I can pull it out. It's right here. So if you asked me if I'd ever own a Monstera obliqua, I would have said no. This is my Monstera obliqua. I got it when this was its newest leaf. You can see this has no holes. And which one's the newest? I think this is one of the newest leaves, so we're very holy. And this is one of them too, and then I have another plant. There's two plants in this pot. So I got two Monstera obliquas, essentially. And it's a beautiful plant. $20. 20. That's how much I paid for my obliqua. And I will say that Canadian plant prices are almost always higher than other places, just because it's like, you know, there's more people in America, it's more accessible, there's more things you can get. I bought my obliqua for $20. I did eventually get an obliqua, and it was for way less than I could have ever imagined. Actually, two of my friends at the same plant show also got Monstera obliquas. Mine has always been the nicest, but whatever. So I guess if you're doing the math on that, I did not propagate that plant. It came with two plants in the pot. It was $10 per obliqua. And these were full rooted plants. They weren't, they didn't have holes at the time. They weren't fenestrated, but they were full plants. So wait, I promise the price will come down and it will be good for your mental health. And you do not want to look back and have regrets because you spent $2,000 on a plant that will become cheap in 2 or 3 years. And you don't have to wait that long. 2 or 3 years isn't that long. It feels like a long time, but once you're in the hobby, you're like, oh, I can buy an oblique one now, cool. So that's how you protect your mental health in plants. It's different if you're like a large sale buyer and there's potential for you to make money on a plant, even if the price starts to come down, because you're probably part of the reason the price starts to come down. I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to people like me who are pretty much purely collectors and only sell on like their Instagram stories and maybe Facebook Marketplace. So to protect your mental health, wait. Set prices that you're comfortable spending money on plants for, whatever. Don't try to be too impulsive, because I have made questionable impulsive plant purchases. They're, for the most part, also alive, so that's good, but yeah, it sucks. And I can say, as somebody who's spent too much on plants, or at the time, what seemed like a great deal, and now you look back and you're like, that was way too much. They're $15 now, so that's maybe like a bad thing that plants can do to your mental health, is like having regret and spending anxiety. But you can also mitigate that by, like I said, creating a wish list, putting the prices on the wish list that you are comfortable spending on specific plants. Ranges, like I won't, like, let's say that you won't spend over $300 on a plant. You won't spend over, maybe your limit's like $40 on a plant. That's like your limit. You will not spend more than $40 on a plant. That's fine. And at the same time, I think that if you like growing plants and you're a plant person, then you should be okay with getting little ones. So you can save money by getting cuttings, trading. I mean, that's free basically if you are doing a straight trade. And you can also always save money by getting a plant smaller. And I love getting plants as small as I can possibly get them, because then I get to see them mature, like my obliqua, where it grow up fully, has these beautiful fenestrated leaves. So yeah, I guess overall those are like the kind of like how plants have affected my mental health since I started collecting. Overall, extremely good. They help take my mind off things. They give me something to think about that is different and not like, oh my god, is the world ending? Am I gonna fail school? Am I ever gonna go back to school? Like all those sorts of things. And it is able to kind of alter my home, where I add like some beauty to my home and some happiness to my home by adding in things that I genuinely enjoy looking at. It also kind of fulfills that like urge in me to like almost like gamble, like, oh, what is the new leaf gonna do? Is it gonna be more mature? Is it gonna be beautiful? Is it gonna be good? And it has had like a couple like negative effects on me, just like probably mostly around spending and anxiety around spending and being impulsive with buying plants. But you can also mitigate that, like I said. So it's all great. I love plants. I think that genuinely any hobby you have that you really enjoy and that you takes up space in your brain all the time and you're always thinking about it will be great for you. But that is how plants have been great to me. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.